for self-evident truths. That there has to be a God. Not that there is, but rather that the universe cannot exist without a God. The first one is death. Even though it's something that we may think about when we see it ourselves, we still try to run away from it. We constantly are trying to live longer as human beings because we know for a fact that it's inevitable. It's going to come to us at some point in our lives. Death in and of itself comes to everything. It doesn't just come to us as human beings. Everything is going to end at some point. Even the sun itself is going to die out and its light, even though it looks as though it's going to last for all eternity. So what is death then? Why does it come to us? Well, say someone who's a pantheist might say, well, the universe is just going to put us into this pool, and we are going to live for all eternity in that pool. But that purely comes from the basis of, I really don't want to die, and I want to live for eternity. And also, I really don't want to be judged for anything I've done wrong. So especially those kinds of people hate sin and talking about doing bad things. Constantly speaking as if that's not even an option, being judged for what you've done wrong. And they constantly try to escape it. And that is because, well, we know as Christians that it's the conscience is constantly condemning them. So therefore, that cannot be the answer. So what about what the atheists say? They say, well, it's just natural order. And I've asked atheists why we die and still have no real reason, no straight answer why things have to end. No one does. I've asked so many people, and yet they still can't give me an answer as to why we die, why things have to end. It's utterly inevitable, and yet we try to find the answers, and absolutely no one has an answer to it. Not only that, but every single human being on earth is going to die. And that's plain and simple in God's point of view, because he says the soul that sins shall die. The wages of sin is death. His payment for you, for your sin, is death. He also says that every single soul on earth sins. We all fall short of his glory. Every heart is deceitfully wicked. Who can know it? There are none righteous, none that seek after God. No, not one. And then 10 out of 10 people die. So if 100% of people sin, according to God, and 100% of people die, according to reality, does that mean that God's ruling is reality? Does that mean that the real reason we die is because of our sin? Not the physical reason, but the idea that we have to. The reason we have to die in the first place is because of our own sin, and that's why things have to end. Think of it more like this. Many atheists will say, well, there can't be a God because he's kind of a jerk. There's evil all around us. How in the world could there be such a God, one that's so good, as you call him, and yet there's evil all around us? Can you explain that to me? And yet, first of all, that argument is not understood when it is being said, because evil and good are ideas and concepts that are not materialist, but rather are spiritual concepts. So if you use the argument of a spiritual concept and yet you're a materialist, you are giving a very false argument and you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. But regardless, even so, it's a better question to ask would be like, how does evil make sense in your worldview? Just ask a question like that, for goodness sake. Regardless, it's plain and simple. We bring evil upon ourselves as human beings. And our sin brings about our own destruction. We bring it to ourselves. As the Bible says, we lead everyone to his own way. We go astray. We run away from God. We curse God and blaspheme his name constantly. We hate people. We lust. We fornicate. We commit homosexuality. We lie. We steal. We covet. And yet, we do not condemn these things properly, and many of the times we justify ourselves or even call those things that we had done good, when clearly they are more than just sin, but the very reason we bring about death. And the second evident truth, no human being on earth is morally good. Now, many people will say, well, of course I'm a good person. I do good things all the time, just like everyone else. Not everyone's perfect, but even that argument, it's very simple to know why the person is saying those kinds of words in that way. It's purely because of conviction of what he has done wrong, of what the person has committed, and feels guilty. Because why else would you give an argument like that? You could purely say, I've never done anything wrong in my life. That would be a much more solid and much more evident thing to give even. And you could say, here, I even have proof. Give me some kind of chance, and I promise you, I won't do anything wrong. But we know in and of ourselves that we sin. We do bad things constantly. We are filled with evil. Even just say this. What keeps us from having sex with a woman? Fornicating. It's plain and simple. What keeps us from that? Say if we had absolutely every reason to as a man, and yet there are many who don't do it. There are many who keep themselves pure, and you might say, well, that's the religion, and that's what they're trying to do. But think about it seriously. Even atheists, they do it constantly, and they live their lives in heathenism, and it's because from their point of view, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But yet, in society itself, we don't do it in front of people. Why not? Because we know it's wrong. So we hide it. We constantly hide it. We constantly hide what we've done wrong. And even beyond that, even atheists who don't necessarily have a proper moral compass, just look at the definition of good itself. Go into the dictionary and look at the first definition of good. What is it going to be? Moral perfection. Absolute, utter perfection. God himself has to be the standard for moral perfection. Because there are good things. And good and evil isn't as simple as, well, they're black and white. It's more like, and technically this is still black and white, but evil is just not good. Good is how things are supposed to be. Evil is everything else. In other words, just not doing what, say, God originally intended and what is actually supposed to happen. That is evil, essentially. So then, if God is that ultimate standard, he has also set a standard. And say, well, what is his standard? Well, you can find that in the Bible, but it is the ultimate law. It lines up with the logic that God is the ultimate standard, and his ultimate standard is the thought of lying is still considered a lie. The thought of stealing, the thought of having fornication. He considers hatred murder, considers lying lips an utter abomination, as worse as witchcraft and rebellion. It's the same to him. Every single sin is utterly disgusting and putrid to him. And why? Because it's against what he originally designed, and because he is that perfect standard. He has always been that absolute standard, and when we go against that, we feel this ache in our hearts. It's like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. And that's your conscience. It's a God-given knowledge. Con means with, and science means knowledge. It's a God-given knowledge. Even though atheists, skeptics, anyone else might completely disagree with you, might completely disagree with me, it's still something that we have inside of us. So that's the second self-evident truth, is that everyone on earth has committed one sin, one evil deed, one time or another. And just like if you're before a judge, you should be condemned for what you've done wrong, not for what you've done good. And that could mean anything in God's court. Literally anything. Because he also says that if you know to do the right thing and you don't do it, to him it is sin. We sin so many times more than we actually realize that our judgment is set in stone. And again, atheists and skeptics completely will disagree with me, but that is still self-evident, and something that any atheist or skeptic cannot disagree with me is that our morality is fallen utterly short of a perfect law. We are not perfect, and we sin constantly. We do evil on a consistent basis, and we love it and we enjoy it, and that's the problem, and that is why we die. Now, the third self-evident truth is actually truth in and of itself. Many will say, well, that is your truth. That is not what I believe. That is not my God. But even so, it is a lack of understanding of what truth in and of itself is. I heard this quote one time is, well, that's a fact. That's not truth. That's not what truth is. That's just a fact. Think about that for a moment. Since when has a fact not been truth? Truth is a standard. It is consistency. It is something that always happens. That is truth. And that statement is true. If I say there is more than one truth, how do I know that that statement I just said was true? I can't. Because if there is no single truth, single standard, then everything that not only everything that we see, but our existence is so utterly meaningless in a facade that we have not ever even spoken any words. Literally, everything that we have said, it's nothing. Then there is literally nothing. And yet I can see my hands and see them work. I can feel my mouth move as I speak. And yet I say that I'm literally saying, in a more extensive sense, I am literally saying that this world is nothing and based upon just ideas that you create, even though this world is materialist. That is utterly preposterous and absolute ignorance and stupidity. I'm sorry to anyone who has ever said that in their lives, but yes, it is absolute utter ignorance. I'm sorry you went to a secular college. I did not. Thank the Lord. But regardless, there is always one truth in everything. Truth in and of itself is just what we try to find. We try to find the truth in this matter. Say, currently we are all searching for the truth in life, the meaning of life, and the true meaning of life. That is what truth is. It is what we constantly seek, and it is consistent. And so therefore, God himself has to be that standard and that truth. If he is pre-existent and he has created all of life and all of the rules and laws, he himself has to be that standard. Because if he's the moral standard, he also has to be the standard of truth. He has to lead that because there's no one above him. He is the ultimatum. He is that's why he said, I'm the beginning and the end. Because literally nothing exists without him, and not only his presence, but because he is the standard of truth. Because everything is utterly meaningless to the point that it doesn't exist if there is not one truth. But there is one truth. That's why he said, without me, nothing exists. He's literally giving a philosophical answer to every single atheist and skeptic out there, and yet constantly just argue whether the Bible is evident. And God himself literally said, you have literally no idea what you're talking about. I'm the standard. And we try to look for the standard, but God himself is the standard. He has to be. Again, so many will say, well, you're saying you're personifying him. He personifies himself. He is general. That's an English term, and even in Hebrew, when I use male forms, it's general. He is a spirit. He dwells everywhere, not in one single area. He even said, I dwell in the hearts of men. I do not dwell in tents, but I dwell in the hearts of men. He is not just one single entity that rules on a seat. It's more like he is inside. It's more like we abide in him rather than he abides in us. Whereas literally atoms and electrons, they all exist. Photons, neutrons, all of them, they hold together by his hand. That's even in the Bible, is that he holds everything by the hand of his power. In him we move and live and have our being. He is literally beyond. That's why he said, I am the God of gods. He is beyond all other standards that we have designed and created, because he literally designed everything about us. Even though an atheist or skeptic might utterly disagree with me, it doesn't matter. It has to be one truth. You can't tell me there isn't, because then you're not telling me anything. You're not giving me an argument if you say there's more than one truth. So there has to be one truth. That is self-evident. And the fourth and final one is that this universe could not have created itself, but rather there has to be someone who is intelligent and pre-existent. And again, I say someone loosely, okay? Someone beyond the rules, but also intelligent. I say something, I say someone, regardless, I'm giving off the same idea. Pre-existent, intelligent. Why intelligent? Well, just look at the human brain. Yet we constantly create supercomputers, and they cannot stand up to the human brain. And it's the fact that it is so perfectly designed. Not that you don't have inconsistencies in other minds or brains, or say sometimes cancer or sometimes false ones, say like in manufacturing, but rather that's just, again, those issues come into our life because sin lives in the world. So again, that's just the worldview. I'm just pointing that out. But the brain is so complex. DNA, utterly genius design. Any engineer who looks at the design of the human being has to testify. If he does not, he is just being stubborn, because again, you can always testify to the genius design of the human being and of even the rest of creation. Just look at all of the planets and how they're created and how they work in perfect order. Even a man named Stephen Hawking had actually said that he once proved that there has to be a creator for the universe. At some point, some singularity in history, there has to be a creator. But I'd rather believe that the universe created itself. That's what he said. That is literally what he said. He said, I'd rather believe that the universe created itself because I know for a fact that the other one is God. There's no way I'm going to have faith in some God. You know why? Because he feels convicted for the things he's done wrong, and he'd rather live his life in heathenism. Sadly, that man died and is living in hell for all eternity and burning in the lake of fire. And I can only but feel terrible for that man and the fact that he was so stubborn. But regardless, he was an atheist. So you can never tell me that the design of creation is intelligent. If the universe, or if, say, nothing created everything, why is it so consistent? Why does it work in perfect order? Why is it the universe just hasn't collapsed on top of us? Why does it keep expanding and things keep creating and human beings keep growing? And you say, well, that's evolution. Well, then who put that law in place? Nothing? Because if so, it's a pretty genius plan. No, I don't believe that evolution is a possibility. I believe that adaptation is. But no, evolution is not a possibility. Regardless, that's not my argument. Likewise, there has to be something pre-existent to existence to create existence. In other words, something that is eternal. Something that self-exists. Because if we do not self-exist, and we know that we don't, then something that does self-exist has to have had created us. Some atheists or skeptics might say, well, energy and matter is eternal, and it created us. But again, back to the fact that it has to be intelligent. And eventually you get to the point where, oh, that's just a God. Oh, and that's what Stephen Hawking realized. It's like, oh, that's God. No, I'm not going to believe that. See? It's stubbornness. You being utterly closed-minded to the point that you won't even think or consider my argument or the questions that I have, but rather you would rather attack it because you despise it. Think openly. Open your mind, atheists. Open your mind, skeptics. This is a message for every single one of you out there. For utterly evident truths that that all lead to a God. There is death that we cannot escape. There is immorality inside of us that also we cannot escape, and we love it and we enjoy it. There is truth, one truth, and consistently throughout all of the universe, there is one set standard, because things do not go back. Rather, things keep going forward, and time keeps going forward. It does not go back. So it is one single truth. And fourthly, there is a God that has created all of us, but rather there is a being that is intelligent, that is pre-existent, self-existent. And the reason I say it is God himself, God of the Bible, because in the book called Exodus, you know what he says to a man named Moses? I am Yehovah. I am the self-existent one. Esia eher esia. I am that I am. I am self-existent. No one has created me. I am the one that has created all because I am beyond everything. He's literally answering the world's greatest questions for one that is eternal and self-existent. He is literally saying, I am that one that these atheists and skeptics have been searching for all eternity, and say it's just matter and energy. Or Stephen Hawking, I'd rather believe that the universe created itself. He knew absolutely there has to be a God. And he denied it to his death, which is very, very sad. But you still have a choice. So please think about this with an open mind. Don't be so utterly caught up in your heathenism. Don't think about the next time you want to have fornication with a woman. Don't think about the next time you're going to, steal something, covet something. How you want to just live your life your way. Not that I don't sin. I need Jesus for a reason. There's a reason he died for everyone. And that is why there is a God. For self-evident truths that no one can fight. Even Albert Einstein testified to there being a God. He just said he was distant. But when God said, I dwell in the hearts of men, he meant I am much, much closer than you realize. And he is in my heart. And he has lived with me for many years. And I know him personally. And even if I say that is the fifth self-evident truth, that I am the reason, I am proof that there is a God. But atheists, you're not actually atheists. An atheist cannot be an atheist. There's no such thing as an atheist because, as Jordan Peterson said, you yourself are proof that there is a God. Your being is proof that there is a God. God bless.